Yo, it's your boy Ancient Albatross here again, behind the scenes as usual, but we have the Cypher Unlimited crew, our usual suspects of Spiggs 18 or Anthony. We have the ever lovely Alpha Dean or simply Dean. And as a quick reminder, if you haven't already, be sure to follow us here on Twitch and subscribe to us over on YouTube. It is a great help for our channels, and we really appreciate all the support we've gotten so far. But without further ado, Dean, what are we doing here tonight?
Well, Al, Anthony, you know what we're here for. We're here to talk about character arcs. So we're going to just jump right in. There's no need for preamble. I'm going to get in. We're going to talk about it right from the CSR, the definition of character arcs.
Oh, there is a little need for preamble. First of all, special thank you to SirJames for giving us the suggestion. I want to shout him out. He was the one that actually asked for the suggestion. SirJames, thank you so much. And I'm sorry we're late, but the Knicks were in the playoffs. They won, by the way. It's all my fault. I'll take the loss on that one.
All right. Without further ado.
And character arcs was a discussion that was going on several channels on the Discord yesterday. And SirJames asked us to do a video. Maybe we'll go over it a little bit. So like always, whenever we do these discussions, we like to start off with the definition. And Dean is going to so eloquently read the definition for us right now. So my apologies, Dean, for the cutoff, but go ahead with the definition.
It's all right, Anthony. I don't care. This is what we do. So character arcs, directly from the CSR, the definition of character arc comes in as such. Character arcs are a means by which players can invest themselves more in great stories and character depth and development. Just like in a book or television show, characters progress through their own personal stories and change over time. A PC with a character arc decides for themselves what they do and why. Character arcs are like stated goals for the character, and by progressing towards that goal, the character advances. The key word here is progressive. A PC doesn't have to succeed at achieving the goal to earn advancement. It's not an all or nothing prospect. Each arc is key to a single character, but just like in a book or show, characters can take part in the larger story arc that the whole group participates in, while also progressing their own personal arc. Every character, or should I say, character arcs have different steps that mark the character's progress through the arc. Each arc eventually reaches a climax and then finishes with a step that is a final resolution. Each step earns the character 2 XP. Character arcs are the most straightforward way that a character earns XP. At character creation, a player can choose one character arc for their PC at no cost. Players have the option not to choose one, but it's probably a good idea to do so. First and foremost, it is a character defining factor, and if they begin the campaign with a desire to find the woman who killed their brother, that says a lot about the character. They had a brother, he was likely close to them, he had been in at least one dangerous situation. The character is probably motivated by anger, hate, or at least somewhat. Even after the character finishes this arc, they'll undoubtedly have at least one more because they can gain new arcs as the campaign progresses. Once play begins, players can take on a new arc whenever they wish, as it fits the character's ongoing story. Taking a new arc has a cost of 1 XP. While there are no hard limits on how many arcs a character can have at one time, realistically, most PCs couldn't reasonably have more than 3 or 4. However, as mentioned above, arcs have a beginning cost that must be paid, reflecting the character's devotion to the goal. The character will earn this investment back probably many times over if the arc is completed. Character arcs are always player-driven. A GM cannot force one on a character. That said, the events in the narrative often present story arc opportunities, inspire character arcs for PCs. It is certainly in the GM's purview to suggest possible arcs related to the events going on. For example, if the GM presents an encounter in which an NPC wishes to learn from the PC, it might make sense to suggest taking the instruction arc. Whether or not the PC takes on the student, the player doesn't have to adopt the instruction arc unless they want to. At the end of a session, review the actions you took and describe how they might equate to completion of a step or possibly more than one step in their character arc. If the GM agrees, the character gets their reward. So that's the basic definition of character arcs. I know it was a lot said, big mouthfuls. Let's discuss that a little bit, Anthony, before we actually pull an arc up.
The first thing that struck me right off the bat that I don't think I've ever like even realized that it costs an XP to purchase an additional arc if you completed your first arc. For some reason I might have bypassed that when we were using arcs because I don't remember ever charging someone for an additional arc, and I don't remember ever being charged for an additional arc. We just took it.
Well, normally we run one shot, so it doesn't come up as often.
Yeah.
I've actually done it in a couple of games that I've run, which strikes me.
No, I mean, I've run several. I've used character arcs before. You know,
I'm not saying you haven't used them. I'm saying I've actually used the XP cost in in some of my longer term games. Is all, But yeah, that is something to take note of, and I think that's very important, for players to understand. Again, Cypher is resource management. Cypher is give and take. Cypher is a discussion. So that XP starts the discussion, when you decide you're going to take another character arc. I think it's pretty cool. But as it says, you're going to earn that 1 XP back many times over, depending on.
The other thing that I want to bring up, because I think it's worth mentioning, and I think this was discussed on the Discord, right, was that the XP is rewarded at the end of the session according to the progression a person makes on their arc. I do believe as a player I was awarded XP. I don't remember what game it was, but I was awarded XP for progression on my arc in game. If we're doing raw, it should be at the end of the session, correct? Or at least that's how
correct. According to the way it's written here.
Yeah.
End of every session, you are supposed to have that discussion with your GM to say, okay, I know we were doing this, but maybe this or that, help me progress my story arc along. We actually were doing that in KetHub's game, in the superhero game with KetHub. At the end of the session, as he was giving out XP, everybody got to talk about, hey, this is what I'm doing in my arc, or this is what I think I've done, and so it worked out pretty nicely.
KetHub actually just chimed in. He said, I award it when it makes sense. Sometimes for me that's mid-session, but it's still up to the player to poke me since it's player agency. I mean, like with any other rule, any rule in Cypher System for that matter, it's plug and play. So it's not going to break the game whether you award it at the beginning of the next session, the end of the session, or mid-session. None of that's going to really matter. It's only 2 XP. It's not like it's going to change anything. But I just wanted to state the raw first, right, and then we could definitely talk about how we would make any changes if we really wanted to. The last thing I want to bring up before we actually get into the heart of the discussion, right, is that I'm going to read 2 sample arcs, but these are arcs taken directly from the CSR, but we'll talk about this later in the video. But every setting book has example arcs, and me and Dean were just talking about this offline, that according to the setting, the arcs might be different because it's geared towards whatever the setting is. But every setting book has sample arcs in it, and you can write your own. I think most people would tend to want to write their own instead of using the ones out of the book. But that's just
what I was going to say about that when we got to it, since you brought it up. The beautiful thing about the arcs in the book, they are perfect templates for you to begin with. You know what I'm saying? There's something there to be said about them. I know with new players, I've never offered arcs, at character creation, but I bring it up at character creation to let them know and, get them to kind of start buying in, and they'll build their first arc, and I don't charge them the XP anyway, for that first arc regardless. I don't charge them for that first one because I'm giving them the opportunity to kind of get their rhythm and start.
Yeah, the first arc is free anyway, according to Raw.
But that's what I'm saying. According to Raw, it's free anyway. But I'm saying I don't have them. I don't have players do it at character creation. I have them do it, 1 or 2 sessions in once they get a feel for the game and a feel for
Oh, that's interesting.
setting.
That's interesting. I would personally. Yeah, we'll talk about this and then I'll read the sample arcs, right? I would think as a GM, right? I would think as a GM, you would want the arcs at character creation because it's gonna impact and it's gonna help you with your game design, your session design, because you could then gear certain scenes or certain NPCs towards those arcs. But what you're saying is you want to generate a couple of sessions in and then let them develop the arc from the material that's already been played. That's very interesting.
And I only do that. I do that a lot of times because they're new players, and I don't want to overwhelm them.
Oh, I don't think it's the wrong way of doing it.
Oh no, I wasn't saying. Yeah. I'm saying the reason why I normally do that with new players because I don't want to overwhelm them. I don't want them to get choice paralysis. I don't want to give them too much to think about. So I give them the ability, and like I said, I'll tell them about it, but I tell them, as you get to know your character, let's develop some background story, and then you can develop a character arc or whatever, and do it that way.
No, what you're saying makes absolute sense. And I think that it makes even more sense for the player because they get to see where they fit in the world and they get a sense of what they want their character to be. And then that way they could, make their arc according to like, okay, now I played 2 sessions. I have a good idea what my character is or what I want my character's ultimate goal to be. And you allow them to decide. If they decide at the beginning of the game, they might feel beholden to want to follow whatever arc they chose, even though that's not how their character, Right. And I know we've all experienced this. You have a vision in your mind, like, oh, my character's this. But then when you actually start playing, your character has a totally different personality than what you envisioned before you started the game. The goal that you have for your character totally changes because of the actions of either other characters or the general setting that the GM put in front of you. So what you're saying actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's just like I said, it's just little things that I pick up. I picked up running different people. Seasoned players, people who've coming from other games, they get it. They get the buy-in. They get the whole concept. These are the people who are going to write me, a 10, 15-page treatise on the character's background up to the day they got, our first session. Then you got those people who they don't know which way to go. And like you said, I don't want choice paralysis. So I do it that's just something I came up with. I don't even know why it happened, but it was, I remember one player kind of coming to me. They didn't choose a character arc. And then after like the 3rd session, they were saying, everything that's going on, and, my character, you said he had a background. What if this character, his father worked for the company for 20 years and, they had, they ended up killing his father off with no pension and all of this, could I make this into like a story where I want to expose them? And that's when it hit me. It's like, this is perfect. I got to start doing this with new players because new players don't have the same buy-in that we do, from the get-go.
Yeah, I would think like the initial design for arcs. And once again, I can't like jump into the mind of Monty on this, but I would think the initial design of arcs was, hey, this is twofold, right? One, it's to teach a player in a campaign to have goals, right? And to get awarded for having goals. So like when you're sitting at the table and you've never really role played before, you have this arc in front of you or you chose this arc. It's there to say, hey, this gives me a direction on how I'm gonna, how am I gonna role play my character? And as a GM, if it's done beforehand. It's, hey, I could build my story around these character arcs. Like I have an overall theme, and now here's all these little side quests, plot seeds that I could use, to keep the story moving forward. Like I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna hit one player's arc per session or whatever it is. So I think it's a tool to help with narrative play.
And it's funny too because in the chat, old Gus was saying he just said something interesting, and it kind of harkens back to everything you're saying, Anthony. Gus said he said where did it right here. Oh yeah, he said XP reveals who you really want to be and where you want to go. So I think it is why the GM awards XP, and also why players justify handing XP to someone else. Is a way of articulating why. And I think that actually kind of goes hand in hand with everything you just said, on top of the fact that there's one major aspect that I think both of us haven't really drilled in on. It literally, player arcs literally link your players to the world, to the setting, to the campaign.
And some link you directly to other players.
Right, that too. And that's what I'm saying. So I personally think character arcs are, I know they're optional, but I think, they really work well no matter what time what table you're sitting at. And, I've even, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but like I said, I've even done mini arcs that we use inside of one-shots,
Oh yeah, we definitely go talk about one-shots because I have some ideas to incorporate arcs into one-shots, and I know Al's mentioned it. They mentioned it on server. They made it seem like it's impossible to use arcs in one-shots. It's not impossible to use anything in the Cypher System for anything. So we'll definitely talk about that. But I think this is a perfect time for me to read 2 sample arcs that I got from the CSR, and they both a little different. So the first one I chose was Aid a Friend, and it says, someone needs your help. When a PC friend takes a character arc, you could select this arc to help them with whatever their arc is, if appropriate. The steps and climax depend entirely on their chosen arc. If the friend is an NPC, the steps and climax are lifted from another arc appropriate to whatever they seek to do. It's difficult, but possible to aid a friend with an arc, even if that friend is unwilling to accept or is ignorant of your help. The costs and rewards for a character with this arc are the same as those described in the original character arc. The opening, answering the call, offering to help, or responding requests to help. Steps and climax depends on the friend's arc. Rewards are the same for you and as for your friend. The resolution is you speak with your friend and learn if they are satisfied. Together you share what you've learned, if anything, and where they will go from here. This is a fantastic, I actually love this arc because it's funny we mentioned one-shots, but this arc is something that you absolutely can use in a one-shot because one-shots tend to be one or two player driven, and most of the other characters might be support, like revenging the death of our king or whatever it is, right? So this is a way of tying 2 characters together. I love the idea of your arc. The other player may not know that your arc is to aid them. And I would go even one step further. I would do hinder a friend, and it'll be your arc is to stop the other person in the party from completing their arc. And that'll be mad fun too.
I mean, well, first of all, Anthony, I think we have to sit back and talk about this because you said something, and I know you just misspoke, but now it's the basis for a new comedy adventure because you said revenging somebody instead of revenging. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking we need to. I think we need to make some slapstick crazy thing. Revenging the stone or something, because that was great. But I think what you're saying is spot on, and that's an arc that can be used with an NPC or a player character. So you could have one player character who their idea, is, like you said, is revenge. And you're their best friend. So you know what? The question is, it's not, we're going to hurt people. It's like, whose car are we taking? So it's that kind of deal. But you do it with an NPC, which in turn turns the NPC into a player character in a lot of respects. But, in that terms, I'm saying a player character for you as the GM. So you're like a member of the party, which is going to be kind of cool. So you're going to have to kind of play that, where you're responding as opposed to just acting outright. So I think it's great. So yeah.
And if you use an NPC, it actually works with your style of doing it, because they won't know what NPCs they are attached to until 1 or 2 sessions in.
Right.
They might be more willing to pick this beforehand if it's another character, but it's very difficult to pick an NPC if you haven't played the sessions yet, because you really don't know, what NPCs you're going to be attached to.
Well, again, like I told you, though, that's something I've done in a couple of one-shots. You brought it up. I've actually done that. I've actually given people these little hidden agendas, and one of them, one of the players has a NPC little brother who's, they were on drugs and being exploited.
It's funny you bring that up, because that's a fine line, and I know Gus mentioned it earlier. There's a fine line between background and arc.
Yes.
Because what you described to me would be more background.
Right. But I'm saying it was a background, but by shifting that into the forefront and in one portion of the story, it becomes an arc. You know what I'm saying? Because so you have narrative control in that respect too. You can shift it back and forth, which, in the player, if there's a player who took that aid a friend, as their arc, then that player could actually cause it to come into play as well. Because they could be like, you know what, I want to do a player intrusion in, this particular scene, that guy over there, he's the drug dealer that was giving my brother, giving him his drugs. I'm going to go confront him. Boom. Now the arc is back in play, stuff like that.
All right, I'm going to read one more arc, and then we could start just like riffing and answer some of the questions you jotted down. Right. The second arc I picked was Defeat a Foe. Someone stands in your way or is threatening you. You must overcome the challenge they represent. Defeat doesn't always mean kill or even fight. Defeating a foe could mean beating them in a chess match or in a competition for a desired mentor. The opening is sizing up the competition. This requires some action, a reconnaissance mission or an investigation. Step 2, investigation. This requires some action, a reconnaissance mission or an investigation. Steps, diving in. You travel towards your opponent, overcome their lackeys, take steps to reach them so you can confront them. This step could take many forms. There might be more than one each step. This step is always active. The climax, confrontation, the contest, challenge, fight, a confrontation occurs. Resolution. You reflect on what you learned and what the consequence of your actions might be. This is just a little nitpick. I don't know about having the resolution in every one of these bios, because it seems to be the same thing in every one. So I think they could have just put it in one, and the assumption is the resolution is the same thing. But that's just me. All right, there seems to be, first off, this is like the generic one if you don't know what you want to pick, to be honest. If you know you're playing in a game where there's a big bad, like the overall campaign is, defeat Vecna, you don't really know what you want to pick. This is your character arc. I want to defeat Vecna. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. And like I said, when you look at that, um, that what we just talked about here is kind of like what I had put up before. When you look at your character arcs, um, they should be, they can be driven and personal, you know. So like I said, one of the questions I had thrown out there was like, what personal goals or unresolved trauma might your character pursue as a character arc, and how could you complicate the party's main quest? So, those are aspects too that I like about character arcs, because they can derail the story, if you will, to a degree. I mean, if we can just take examples out of different films. If you think about uh in Avengers Endgame, when Star Lord, when they were just about had the gauntlet off his hand, and Star Lord start punching him in the side of the head, it messes everything up, because it's like, you killed her. His character arc, his story arc, you know causes monkey wrenches.
I think it's important for people to realize that there's a big difference, right? Like how I mentioned, a character arc is not something that's going to be completed in 1 or 2 sessions. That's why it's broken down into steps. I think a really good character arc should run like 5 or 6 sessions, or
more.
some might be the entire campaign. I think that's why they give you the option to purchase another arc, is because some of your arcs might be an overall, like this is the campaign arc.
Right.
And then some of them might be, okay, I can finish this in 5 or 6 sessions. Because if your arc is completed in 2 or 3 sessions, then that wasn't an arc. That was a background personal goal that I don't know if that makes any sense. But yeah, it should be need multiple steps and multiple sessions. Like you shouldn't be completing the arc going from tier 1 to tier 2. I'm more like, oh hey, you finishing your arc at the end of tier 3, or maybe in
well, like I said, I mean, it again, to me, it's relative to itself, because depending on how you're pacing your advancements with your players, and so on and so forth, and depends on just how hard they can go in on working on that arc. But I do agree that it should take some time. It shouldn't be it, because to me the character arcs are subplots. That's what I look at them as. I look at them as subplots. These are little things for me to play with. Especially I love doing character arcs. When I have a campaign going and I have somebody who can't make it. Okay, I have somebody who can't make it, so I will flex a little bit and maybe lean into the character arc this particular session to let that person get through some of the key points of their character arc, versus, somebody missing the meta story, so they're useful for that too.
Jason brought up a great point that's worth discussing. Jason Shadowmane wrote, the fear I have is that players might have an arc that other players aren't interested in or even can't pursue. I worry that if their arcs aren't abstract, they might end up separating the party. That's a great point. And that's actually a legitimate concern. I would think if everyone has buy-ins that we're going to, do these arcs, that might, character arcs might be a session 0 discussion. Like one, we could go, hey, when you choose your arc, do you want to choose it a couple of sessions in, like what you said, so we all like trying to get the same goal? Or if we're choosing our arcs from the book, can we have a discussion to make sure that one player isn't getting left out, that their arc is going to be something that nobody else wants to participate in?
Or nobody, or we're never going to touch it, and they won't get to complete their arc, because that also happens. I mean, the one thing I say about character arcs for me as a GM, the biggest thing I like to take away from character arcs is making them somehow relevant within the game itself. So it's a little bit more work on the GM side, but I always try to make, like, this session may have, especially if they like have, let's just say we had two didactically opposed character arcs. One person wanted to, like, you had defeat a foe, but somebody else had that character arc. They wanted to have the baby. They wanted to, those are two really hard arcs. They go in two different directions. So,
I read that baby one and I was like, oh, this was definitely one of those things that I think Jason would be referring to. Like, we're playing a murder hobo game and you have that I want to raise a family arc.
Yeah, So I think, as far as it's like the way I see it is that characters are you as a GM and the character have to have that discussion in order to figure the proper buy-in on both sides. Because as a GM, you have to buy into the character arc as well. So, I think we got to have that discussion.
Also, too, it might be worth mentioning, and I know this isn't an ideal solution, but it is a solution, right? It's also worth mentioning if someone is steadfast and like, hey, nobody in the group likes my arc, but I really want to do this. You could always say, okay, we're gonna have to meet outside of a regularly scheduled game and do a one-on-one session to add some parts, to help you complete your arc.
Yeah.
If I know that's not the ideal solution, but that is a solution. It's like, back in the D&D days, we used to do that with side quests. When someone had a side quest they absolutely wanted to do, we used to, okay, we'll play a side session so you could, find this gun part or find this elixir that you've been looking for as a character,
Right. Well, that's what I said. That was what I was saying too about not having everybody at a session. If you didn't have everybody at a session and you needed to do an offshoot, but you still wanted the game to continue running, well, that's the purview of you being, a storyteller. Where the prime example, like you brought up, finding the elixir, well, this elixir is, on the south side of town, but everything that the players are doing is on the north side. So guess what? This week, this one and this one isn't here. Okay, the party got separated. You ended up on the south side, and I would run an entire session that would help them, handle that character arc versus taking away from the big game that everybody else is a part of. That type thing.
We got a couple of pretty good things in chat. Chill Space, first time chat at Chill Space, welcome. I like the approach that Invisible Sun takes. In general, the player decisions are considered canon, which gives the GM a jumping point to build a narrative. Not moving so fast I can read it. The chat. So building that between characters and GM. It is up to the GM to provide additional hooks to integrate other player arcs while keeping the player of the day intact. Yeah, that Invisible Sun has a lot of great design aspects. It can help. Well, I know you mentioned that character arcs cost 1 XP, but I also like to grant a character arc as a reward. Or let me see what else. Cat's moving so fast. Can't help us effing me up. Screw you, can't help. You did that on purpose. Now I'm not gonna read the rest of your chat.
If you lose it back, push it back, it'll pause it, and then it won't move.
No, he was being a jerk. Man.
I know, I saw him.
Like a Cypher treasure, artifact, etc. Can't stop, won't stop.
So, but that's it. That is what Chill Space said. That's what I'm saying. Using the player character arcs, it becomes canon. In the sense that these are things that I have at my disposal to use to continue to progress the gameplay as well as the story. And so those integrations or those little side quests or however you want to look at it, that's the whole point of what I was saying about, how we can use them to mitigate time. And then, and again, it's not like I'm just making something up or we got to run something else. We can play the same characters, but get something else done, so to speak.
Quick thing. Billy Loser told me that I got to watch Sinners. Remember in your stream, this has nothing to do with our chat, but I want to bring it up. Remember when you was talking about Sinners on your stream and I said it reminds me of Dusk to Dawn?
Yes.
I read an article today and they asked the director what his favorite movie of all time is. And
he said Dusk to Dawn.
And he said Dusk to Dawn. And he said that Sinners is
Inspired.
Is the Afro version of Dusk to Dawn.
Oh, in no uncertain trust me. Look, but
it was funny that my initial reaction was, hey, this reminds me of Dusk to Dawn. And to hear him say that, I thought that was hilarious.
And just so you know, Anthony, that's why I was running late, because I took somebody else to see it today.
Yeah.
This is my second time seeing it, and my wife says she wants to go back, so I'll be going back.
I'm going Sunday.
Dude, I swear to God. I swear to God.
It just made me think about, because it was funny. Yeah, it was funny when I was like, yo, this kind of has, like, it kind of reminds me of Dusk to Dawn, and then to hear him say that that's his favorite horror movie of all time was kind of funny.
Yeah, you'll like it. I'm telling you, you're going to love it. It's hotness.
Oh, I know I'm going to like it. I knew I was going to like it from the trailer.
And so this is something else that I like to throw in there, that, because I put some questions for us to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
In the chat. And so another thing I like to do with character arcs is I try to look at it through the lens of the game. The fact that Cypher is cinematic, narrative, and I'm saying so scene driven. So a lot of times, a lot of things I'll do is to give people ways to move their character arc. I'll give them a flashback moment, or, the one question I wrote, what would your character's slow motion hero moment look like in a movie, and what's the cost of that moment? So, do me a flashback, give me something, on the player side where I can.
Is that, all right, not to cut you off, is that for character arc creation?
No, that's character arc. That's for character arc progression.
Progression.
Yeah, that's for them while they're in the moment.
So that's after they pick the character arc.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm moving into that portion. Because picking a character arc can be difficult, but how are we going to resolve the character arc? The steps. How do you make them prevalent or make them show up? And this is what I was talking about. I mean, I was sorry, the chat caught my eye. I thought somebody was saying something. But
I have a question on these notes you wrote, right?
Yeah.
You have 3 questions under the title character driven and personal. And then you have 3 questions under the title cinematic and scene driven.
Yep.
Do you view these as different arcs, or do you view these as ways? Because from what I see, what you wrote, it doesn't say arc to me. That's why I'm a little confused.
Okay,
it doesn't. I don't feel like this is what an arc is.
Well, the first 3 questions where it says driven and personal, these are I was looking at it through the lens of when you're building the character arc, what is it that you're trying to do to build your character?
So that's what I mean. These are based on building a character arc.
Yeah, the first
not
3.
on an established one. Yeah.
Right. The first 3 are, or even an established one if you wanted to make it your own, if you wanted to add something to it or switch it around. Because I look at the character arcs.
All right, so read one of the 3 questions you asked us, so chat can hear what we.
So the first question is, what personal goal or unresolved trauma might your character pursue as an arc? How could it complicate the party's main quest? And I just put in italicized letters, think revenge, redemption, discovery of a lost secret, so on and so forth. So you're dependent on what your world you're playing in, and then what kind of character arc would you want to build within that world? And that's where I come from when I was saying about having a couple of sessions and then you making those decisions. You know. So, like for you, Anthony, I mean, you know, when
read the other two,
and the other,
you got to do it as in a whole.
Okay, so the next question I had asked would be, what's one moral line your character swears they would never cross? Under what circumstances might they break that vow? You know, and the idea between that is setting up the tension and, you know, building growth opportunities for the character to further. Did we lose Anthony? Anthony, I think we lost you.
Oh, I'm audible to the stream, and yeah, Anthony is gone. I guess his internet borked.
There he is. He's back.
Oh, welcome back, Anthony. All right, I am hopping back off. Welcome back.
And the last question is, what keeps your character awake at night? Guilt, regret, fear, ambition. Simple questions that can define motivations. The reason why I put those questions together, even if you were using an established arc, those are still questions that you can ask the player. The player can ask themselves as the person walking the path of that arc, so they can really get into it and really develop a really strong arc. Because, you know, again, arcs are vague. You know, they're vague enough that it gives you a lot of room for building, you know, for building a story, a story beat around it.
Yeah. So those more imply for the actual, if I'm designing my own arc. And I kind of agree with Jason. Like, to me, a character arc isn't your goal. A character arc is Jason put it in the chat, but I 100% agree with him. A character arc is the progression to that goal. You know what I mean?
I can see that.
And so like when I saw what you wrote, it looked like, hey, these are how to establish a goal. I think that's why in the description in the book, right, when they talk about arcs, they break it into steps, because it's more about the journey of completing the goal than it is about the goal itself on the arc. And I could be wrong, but that's just how I interpret it.
No, absolutely. That's somebody just said it in the chat too. Gus, he said, I think it's good if players know something explicit about other PCs' arcs. I think it's healthy if everyone understands arcs might succeed or fail or something else interesting happens. So yeah, the steps to get to the end versus the what the end goal is what the character arc is truly all about.
Yeah, because a lot of these are viewed from these questions. A lot of them are viewed from like they sound almost all like the creation of the arc. So when you play, right, and I don't have much experience with this, I'm sure chat does. When you go into a game, do you go into a game thinking I'm gonna pick an arc and build a character from that, or arc build out your character? I've only used arcs as a player twice.
Put it this way, then what you were saying about arcs going in, the truth of the matter is, as far as arcs are concerned, as a player, I've never actually been in as a player to run an arc at all. But I know as a GM, like I said, I personally, especially with new players, like them to play a couple of sessions and, you know, build let their arcs happen organically. If I were told to pick an arc, then I would know what kind of world I'm playing. Is I like I said, if you had said pick an arc when you ran Keep on the Borderlands, okay, then that would have been easy, because I would have been looking for a redemption arc, you know, something because I wanted to redeem my family's name, you know. So having a bit of an intimate knowledge about the setting itself can help you pick an arc. But if I'm bringing people into a wholly new thing or something like that, I kind of like to let them happen organically. You know, give me some background. You have some background. You have stuff to feed off of. But, and I'm just throwing it out there. Like, I have a life path chart that I'm going to introduce into my setting. There's a life path that you can roll on and get all these key anecdotal things from your life up to the point of character creation, and they might inspire you to have a character arc. You know what I'm saying?
You know, it's funny you said that. That was one of my suggestions for not a life path arc per se, but when we were going to talk about one shot, how to use character arcs as a one shot, you know, for a one shot.
Mm-hmm.
My suggestion is that you have create like 20 arcs, right? That are specific to your one shot, and have the players roll. You know, and instead of having multiple steps, you have 2 steps. You have the final goal and the progression step, and have the player roll on that chart, and that's their character arc.
That's cool.
You know, so that was a way of doing it in a one shot where it doesn't screw the one shot up because they all geared towards
the one shot
itself. And you can make it like 10 personal or 10 story driven. You can either have the players roll onto it, or you can have the players pick from your list, but you know it wouldn't screw your story because they already intertwined into what the narrative of the story is to begin with.
Okay,
so it was funny you said that. That was my suggestion.
Well, guys, you heard it here first. Anthony just said something. So going forward, probably in all of our one shots, we're going to probably start developing, a D20 chart where, you guys roll a D20 and you're going to get a character arc at the beginning of our one shots. Yeah. It's out there now. It's done.
Well, they don't even have to roll. They could pick because it doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter what they pick because you know that everything on that list is going to be something that it's not going to put a monkey wrench into your one shot.
Exactly. So I think that's awesome. So moving forward, we were talking about building these character arcs, and Anthony came up with a great idea. This portion here, it was a cinematic and scene driven. And what I was talking about for this were moments if a player really wanted to kind of drive home that they're, completing a step of their arc. How could they go about making that a viable thing in game? And also to give players a taste of narrative control, if you will. Yeah. So things like that, like I was saying, so question 4 is, what would your character's slow motion hero moment look like in a movie? And what's the cost of that moment? So, and I just use think of John Wick's hallway fight or a tragic farewell in the rain if you wanted something more dramatic. Number 5 was if your character got the spotlight episode like in a TV show or whatever, what would it focus on? So that's what I was saying about doing the side quest. Like if everybody couldn't be there, I might say, hey, Anthony, we're going to work on your this session, we're going to kind of work on your character arc. What's this episode going to look like? Give me some, give me a few anecdotal things.
That's from the GM perspective, and I can really dig that. Yeah. Do you think, and this is a question that Chad can answer as well. I think I know your answer because of the way you're gearing up your questions, right? But do you think that character arcs benefit the player more, or do they benefit the GM, or is it equal?
Honestly, I think it's equal. I think as a GM, because it gives me canon, it gives me things to work with, and I love things to work with. But on the other side of the coin, being a player, it gives me as a player investiture. I'm gonna be way more likely to want to do this or that or the third thing, especially if it's in line with my character's overall goals.
I like them for the player more than I do for the GM. I like them for the player because it gives them something to strive for. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like, okay, and it gives them control of the narrative in a way, as in I could gear this story with with player intrusions, with my actions to help me accomplish my arc. So And I think I've messed that up before. I should have been using arcs a lot more than I traditionally have, for that very reason. As we're talking this, it's my mind is thinking of, oh, hey, this is another way to allow the player to have agency in the story, because they want to drive, they want to move their arcs forward. They want to accomplish these goals, and it's another way to award the player, for taking narrative control every once in a while. And I think one of the things that Cypher does better than a lot of systems, it allows the players to have way more agency than you would find in traditional RPGs.
Right. And I agree with you. Ketup made a good point, and it's kind of what we were just talking about. Ketup said, I like letting players unlock the steps mid-session. It was in his game, like the first time my character figured out more of my mechanical nature. I have a character who is actually an AI but doesn't know it. And so that's my character arc, is, finding the truth. But it was like a mid-scene. The other soups had supercharged my character with electricity. And it was successful, but messed up. It messed my character up mentally. So it was a great double-edged sword. It afforded some great role play. It afforded some great storytelling. It gave me a spotlight moment, but then it also gave the GM, another complication for the party, because I was glitching. You know what I'm saying? So it's like really cool when you start seeing these things. And let me put this last question here, and I can throw it right back to Ketup, because that's kind of funny. It said, what specific memory defines your character, or how it might echo through the narrative? In that similar scene, Ketup did something to me later where I saw someone who was from my past, and it triggered this entire series of memories, and we just made up some wild background story on the moment, but it was awesome, So yeah, I think, these things are great when you really, want it to work, and if you have a group that's invested. So,
What was that a completion of a step of your arc, though?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was, because, like I said, the truth is being revealed slowly, and I mean, I've got an idea, but Ketup could go in an entirely different direction, because I don't know the truth. I don't know all the truth yet. I'm just discovering this. Yeah. So it's really, really intense, but in the same breath, everything is connecting to his overall metagame.
What was it, an arc that you chose, like, from the book, or was it an arc that was created?
I think there's an arc in the book called Know the Truth. Or what is it? Hold on, I'm looking now. But it's, the thing about it is like, whether, regardless of how, those things unfold, it was just the fact that you learn, that your story is, your story is like, can become integral to Mysterious Background was the one I chose. That's what it was. You don't know, I didn't know my parents. I don't know where I came from. I don't know anything. So basically it's the beginning, the search, the research, and all these other factors are coming into play to, help me figure out who I am. So
I'm not. It's funny that you bringing this up, because it kind of leads us into the next part that we wanted to talk about. Is, all right, Cypher System gives you the generic art, right? But how about if you're running for a specific setting, say like Magnus Archives or Old Gods or Gods of the Fall, right? They get changed, and you would you pulled out 2 arcs that are exactly the same title.
Yes.
But are geared towards the setting. Could you read? Also, too, you can see how it seems that it has an opening. So correct me if I'm wrong. So this pays you 2 XP 5 times the way it's written and build, right? Correct?
Yeah.
So which one you gonna read first?
I got Old Gods of Appalachia open.
All right, let me.
If anybody wants to follow along, it's page 172 in the book, page 170 on the PDF. I'm sorry, 168 in the book, 170 in the PDF. Excuse me.
And just so you understand what he's doing, he's reading the same exact character arc, but written for two different settings, so we can see what the difference is, and to see if this is a way to to use the character arcs, or would you have preferred all new original build arcs?
Oh, okay. So from Old Gods of Appalachia, it says you're going to build a physical structure, a house, a large boat, a store, community center, defensive wall, or something similar. This arc covers renovating an existing structure or substantially adding to one. Now, these steps basically are the same. The opening, the steps in between, the climax, the resolution. Those are all the same. But then when you come over here for the build, it said, again, it opens with, you're going to build a physical...
Wait.
Hold on.
You're losing me. Over where? I can't see your screen.
I'm sorry. When you come over to the Magnus Archives, which is page 146 in the book or 148 on the PDF.
Yeah.
I didn't mention that we were using those two books. My apologies.
Yeah.
But thank you for catching it. It opens up the same way, which is funny. You're going to build a physical structure. But this one, it says a house which they are in common. But now there's a workshop, a lab, and so on. So they're going to a more modernized ideology. What this is, this arc would also be covering renovating. It can also cover renovating an existing structure or adding to it. But hiring builders and contractors help you work for you. For instance, a character might decide that the institute employing them needs a dedicated MRI machine to check for signs of new kinds of corruption. In some situations, the PC might be forced to set up their own base of operation if they discover that the organization they conduct investigation for have been compromised. So what's interesting, when you look at it, they become kind of story specific in the direction that they're taking you in, but they still have the same broad ideology, of what building is all about. But they take you down that rabbit hole so you can continue to build, like I was saying before, making sure your character arcs are in line with the world, the setting, and so on and so forth.
So if we was to pull up, I would say that if we was to pull up a super setting, it might be mega structures instead of physical structures.
Exactly.
Like if we were pulling up Claim the Sky, right? It might be you're building a fortress, you're building a,
or if you wanted to go another direction, let's just say when Neon Rain came out, you want to build a subnet, you want to build the dark web, you want to build, so you still can see that it can still be used no matter what, but it also can be customized to the existing setting.
So I'm just curious because I rarely spend a lot of time looking over the character arc section, but would you say that just a ballpark figure that these are like 80% the same thing in every book and maybe 4 or 5 original arcs?
I would say about that because it only makes sense. Like I said, if you look at the CSR itself, the CSR tries to kind of paint a wide swath across everything to allow you to, see what you need. Whereas when you get to Old Gods of Appalachia or you get to Magnus Archives, or Shotguns and Sorcery or whatever, those character arcs are written from the perspective of being in that world. So it only makes sense that they're going to be more specific and more, more drilled down, so we can see how to use them in those worlds. But I also think it says a lot to look at the CSR because it'll give you ideas on how to flex, manipulate, twist, turn, and modify an arc in a book if it's not really resonating with you completely.
So would it make more sense, right? Actually, not for these books, because the assumption is that people are this is a standalone game, right? So what? Never mind. What I was going to say, it would it make more sense to just put the original ones in, but they can't do that because the assumption is that Magnus Archives, these are all standalone games.
Right. And I think that's what it. You know what? When I look at the books like Magnus Archives or Old Gods, you know, books that are setting specifics, I like everything to point towards the setting. You know, I like that fact because that's what you're here for. You
I mean,
really,
it has to be that way, though.
well, not that it just has to be, but I'm saying I think it's just better that way because, you know what? If I'm giving you a self-contained book, apparently I want you in that world. I want you invested in it. I don't want you thinking about, oh, what else I could do with this book. I want you more to think about, even though we all do that because that's who we are. But overall, when we decide to run Magnus Archives, you know what? And you open the Magnus Archive book, boom, 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 boom. Everything is working towards that type of story. So I love that, you know. And the other side of the coin is I love the CSR because it's the place that I go look at stuff just to get broad ideas.
Well, they added new ones to the CSR, but it wasn't many, but there were a couple of good ones. Yeah, I think that for the most part, you're gonna get the same 10 or 12 arcs, and then maybe an additional 5 or 6 arcs that are setting specific, and they adjust all the arcs to the setting book or whichever book you know, whether it's Magnus Archives, whether it's Old Gods Appalachia, you know, or Neon Rain. It doesn't. They'll add specific ones and just, you know, reword the existing ones to fit the setting, and all that is fine. I also think too, it's like with everything in Cypher System, it's so easy to create your own arc.
Yeah.
And even as a player, you could create an arc and then give it to the GM for his approval, because since there's no actual mechanical benefits to an arc, it'll be very difficult for a GM to, you know, not use your idea.
No, that's actually, you know,
really your idea.
You know, but that's really a good that's a good point to make. You know, when you look at character arcs in general, yeah, there is no mechanical benefit, nor is there a mechanical detriment. There's nothing for you to do anymore as a GM. You don't have to think about a new mechanic or anything else. You know, you're just thinking about story. You know, you're just thinking about pacing and how best, you know, to make those things work. So, you know, and again, you know, you were saying about character arcs in one-shots. It's funny because I never looked at it as a character arc initially. I called them secrets. You didn't play in that game. That was the game where I did it was basically the movie that came out, Hotel Athena, where all the assassins, the place where the assassins went, and I gave every assassin a secret. They had a goal, you know, some secret goal, and, you know, I would give them a bonus XP if they were able to get that goal accomplished. But that was nothing but a character.
I know where you stole that from, though.
Yeah, I told you that. I told you I was stealing it.
that was Cowboys versus Aliens.
Yeah, remember I played Cowboys, bro. I was like, oh, this is I'm stealing this. And the first chance I got to use it was like 3 years later with that game. But it worked.
But that's another way of doing arcs, is just give them some. But the difference between that is that they have no agency over their arc. You know, that's you forcing an arc on them. I think the difference, the way it's written in Raw, is the player has full agency on their arc.
This is true.
What we're doing is a pseudo arc. It's like, this is an arc that you have no control over it.
Now, you know what's funny? I'm sitting here looking. I'm just because we were talking and I'm going through Magnus Archives versus Old Gods of Appalachia. I finally found one that's in Old Gods, but not in Magnus Archives, and it's one Give Your Word. It's not in Magnus Archives, but it is in Old Gods. Which is pretty cool.
And I'm pretty sure you could find one that vice versa.
And Help Your Neighbor is also not in Magnus Archives. I'm just going through because we were sitting here talking.
Yeah.
You got it.
Chat, is this something about story arcs that we haven't touched on because we're idiots? You could
please
enlighten us. +9. Well, a true joy is to steal a setup from a B movie to get more interesting payoffs from a tabletop RPG story. I do that all the time. I'm the master of stealing from B movies.
Dude, I mean, most of the time for me, it could be a B movie, an A movie. It really doesn't matter because what I like to do is I like to adapt them. I don't necessarily like Anthony. When Anthony said he is the master, this dude is the only dude I know who can give you the movie, redo the movie as an RPG, and you're sitting there like, damn it, I was in the movie. I had a great time. I'm really good at adapting them and making them my own kind of allegory story, or the sequel is what I like to do. So yeah, but you are. So pat your own back.
Jason wrote, you can feel the 3 arc structure in most movies, even if the writer didn't write them in that method. It's just baked into us. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, now it's funny because now, and Dean's always been saying this, but now when I watch a movie, I always view it in Cypher terms. It doesn't matter what kind of movie it is. It could be a comedy, a romantic comedy. I watch it in Cypher terms.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's happened to me. That's, like I said, you started me with the one shot, so that's when every movie became a possible game for me. And then after that, I started looking at my TV series. I'm going up, and now that's how I run my long-term campaigns. I run them in seasons. So it's pretty cool. I've adopted, meshed both worlds, and it really works well for me. I don't know how other people.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, what was your suggestion? Because here's the thing, I'm gonna call BS on that. You can't use. I've never personally really used arcs in a one shot, but now I take it as a personal challenge because people in chat would say you can't use arcs in one shots. I gave you my suggestion. What was your suggestion, Dean?
Oh, like I said, the secrets. I think it works. Like we were just talking about, your whole idea, your secrets idea, that one little anecdotal thing. Or if we do it, or like even better though, I really want to develop that D20 chart for people to roll on. I think that would be absolutely freaking brilliant, and let's make them generalized where they can be adapted to any setting.
And the only thing you have to do is eliminate some of the
steps.
You got to have a opening, one step, and a resolution, or an opening, climax, and a resolution, and that's it. And then you have a one-shot arc.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is I think that's like a really really the easiest way to do it, and and still make it fulfilling. It still works for all of the aspects of what it is. But see, again, when you think about character arcs again are also supposed to be they're just another benefit for players. It's another way for players to earn XP. So this is one of the cool things. So, and you can give other benefits.
Or you could do it this way too, since we're rifting. Instead of giving the individual players like a certain goal, you could do a group arc.
Yep.
And then that way you could actually have multiple steps and let the players decide what their group arc is after like the first hour into the game. And then we'll figure it out from there.
That works. And here's another thing. What I was saying too is you don't always have to give XP as the benefit for them either. Um, in one superhero game, players earn an additional power shift, by completing their arcs. In another game,
Oh yeah, that's a good idea too.
but
Instead of
that's what I'm
XP,
saying. And instead of XP, you can give them some other benefit. You know,
I think Ken Hub mentioned that earlier too.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Ken makes a good point. He said it never hurts to have a character arc written down for inspiration, even if it doesn't come up mechanically for a step. So yes, that is very true. And I think again, we need to go ahead and develop that D20 chart, Anthony, and make it vague enough that it can be used with any one shot you're running.
Good night, +9. Thank you for joining us and on their way out. They will. I gotta get to bed, but arcs. Last thing I say is, as a player, be you, be open, be bold, make choices, embrace change in your character. Everything depends on you. Gus is the ever motivational speaker. That sounds like what you would tell a soldier right before he goes to war.
Hey, Starheart Dragon says in Power Rangers Mystic Force, they unlock new powers, spells by doing story arcs and character arcs. So there you go. You know. So I mean, there's so many different ways. Again, within Cypher, as long as you're letting it flow, I think you're going to be okay because it is modular in nature, and everything in Cypher is easily adapted to something else. It might be written for one thing, but as we've all seen, we can use these things in multiple different ways, in multiple different places.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think arcs are beneficial to players and to GMs. I think arc adds player agency, which is always a good thing. I think arcs help GMs build their narrative, especially when you're getting, stuck on where to lead the move a campaign forward to. You could just grab somebody's arc and start, gear the narrative towards that for a session. It can only help.
Yeah, true. Very true.
And if we're missing anything on this, let us know down below. If you're watching this on YouTube or if you have any opinions on this, let us know as well. I think we're an hour and a half in, Dean. I think we took our character arc to the limit. We might be near completion.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're there. I'm just gonna say for the ending, I'm gonna echo everything Anthony just said about it, and I'm gonna say that don't be afraid of a character arc. As a matter of fact, embrace it. It's a good conversation to have with a GM, with your GM or as a GM to have with your players, because it always gives you something. Like I said, especially for those days that you might be a little burned out, or you didn't plan for a session and, or somebody can't make it. Now you got something to kind of lean into, and everybody is people who are there are going to be into it too, as opposed to just something off the dome. So that's all I got to say about character arcs. Love it, and thanks for letting us talk about it.
Yep, and if you're watching this later, like I said, if we missed anything, let us know in chat. If you have any suggestions to incorporate character arcs or one-shots and ideas, let us know that in chat as well. And I'll leave it until, if you like us and you like what we do, join the Cypher Unlimited Discord server for all things Monty Cook games. We have the largest fan-run Discord server for everything MCG. But if Discord's not for you, join our Facebook group. Still great conversations being had there daily. You can subscribe here on Twitch or go to our YouTube channel and like, share, and subscribe there. We're still trying to build both platforms up. So any help you can give us on that front will be greatly appreciated. Our videos are always free, but if you want to help us out financially in any way, you could give us a little donation on Ko-fi, or go to an online store and pick up some cool Cypher Unlimited merch like the hoodie I got on, hat or shirt that Dean got on. And last but not least, I love you guys. And yes, Dean butchered this last week. I just had to rub it in.
And it's not just him. We love you too. Even though he wants to tell you how much he loves you.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you guys so
That's
much.
part of my character arc.
Thank you guys so much for talking about character arcs. Definitely something to think about when it comes to one shots. Something I might put some thought into as well. Y'all definitely made some good points. Thank you, chat. That was awesome conversation about character arcs. Y'all made some great points. And yeah, as usual, from us at the CU, we will see you later. Peace.